Howland.
Okay. What like road did you grow up on?
I grew up on Muir Woods, which is a little road in Howland, on the other side of the Gulch, as we called it.
Why'd you call it the Gulch?
Because it was just this huge dip down into a stream and back up, and as a kid, you just walk down there and walk through the woods and walk through the Gulch.
Very cool. So, where'd you go to high school?
I went to John F. Kennedy High School.
Okay. And you don't have to say this, but when did you graduate?
Well, I left when I was 16, so I went to John F. Kennedy freshman year, and then I graduated in Rochester, New York in 83.
Okay, so tell me about that. Why'd you move?
My dad worked for General Motors, and he got transferred.
No way. I got my True Blue on under this today. True Blue Friday. Wow, really? Yeah. So I'm sure you've kind of been hearing all about this Lordstown.
Lordstown, yeah.
So he worked at Lordstown.
I believe he did. He worked at Packard.
Okay, so
I think also closed. I think since he worked there, so he worked at Packard. But I mean, we knew Lordstown, of course. He talked about Lordstown all the time, and so the whole thing is very sad to me.
Your dad got transferred from Packard.
Yeah, he got transferred to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and then transferred again to Rochester. So I went to 3 high schools in 4 states by the time I graduated.
Because of the GM job?
Because transferring with the General Motors job, yeah.
How was that? Like, what was that like for you?
It was really hard, honestly. But I think it, in the end, was really good for me because it taught me that people are people, and that you can walk into a room and you can meet great people, and that even though it's a bit scary and it feels very risky, there's always somebody wonderful to meet.
Right.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. So when you heard about GM Lordstown and them idling that plant, what was your reaction?
Just deep sadness, honestly, and I think the reaction that everybody's going to have, which is why, and there wasn't, was there no way, and what's happening, just a lot of questions and sadness.
You had to move, 2 or 3 times. So what's your response to them being like, well, you can move?
It certainly makes sense, and that's a choice that some people will make. It's a choice my father made, and it was hard, but we came out okay. But it's also something that I can understand if it's a choice you don't want to make, that you don't want to leave family and where you grew up. So I think it's a hard thing to ask of people. Some people will embrace that, and some people that will not be with it.
When did you leave Warren? Have you been back to Warren, or you just were you born here?
I was born in Warren, and I lived there until I was 16. Left when I was 16. Like I said, because my dad was being transferred.
Mm-hmm.
I did come back. I came back right before my kids were born. I had who I called my grandmother. She was more of my adopted grandmother. She was a neighbor who I considered my grandmother. And when she died, I came back. And but I talk to my kids all the time that I want to go back and bring them so they can see where I grew up. And I think it informs a lot of who I am and who their mom is. I know it's changed, I'm sure, in those intervening years, but that's my goal, is to bring them back.
So your kids were born. You've lived in LA for.
My kids were born in LA.
Okay.
I've lived here since '94, I think. So.
Okay.
It's the longest place since I left Warren that I've ever lived.
Right. So it's like a second home.
Yeah.
So you said you want to be able to bring your kids back at some point to show them where you grew up. If you could just kind of describe it to them before taking them there, how would you say how would you describe where you grew up, Warren,
I would describe it as, it's so much who I am in terms of the groundedness I feel, and I feel very rooted. The people, it was just a very real place. My kids are growing up in LA, and I worry about that sometimes in terms of wanting them to know where I come from and the rootedness that I felt. I grew up in the woods. My kids are growing up on a city street.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with the city street, but it's very different childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So I want them to go and tromp around the woods and go to the creek where I look for the crayfish, and I want them to stand in Warren's central little town square where there's the gazebo and the courthouse. And when I was getting engaged, I brought my husband to Warren, and he stood and at the courthouse and said, "I'm starting to get you now, more." Like that there's just kind of a Ohio girl in me that is deeply important to me and who I am.
Wow, that's awesome. When did you get engaged and bring him here?
That was back in '94. I brought him in '94 when we were moving out to LA. We were engaged, moving to LA, and packed the U-Haul and did the whole thing. And on the way, I insisted that we stop in Ohio so he could, I took him out to Howland and the Gulch, and I think we even went into Bezetta and just, tooled around so that he could see kind of what formed me.
Absolutely. And you kind of described it, but what do you think was it that formed you? And now, you have a whole different perspective because you live in a city.
I guess, I grew up in the woods, so I have a sense of adventure and imagination because I was just tromping around in the woods, creating stories for myself. And I think the people there, I think the realness of them and the struggle, but also the joy. I remember a lot of joy and fun. Mm-hmm. And I still keep in contact with friends from there, even though I left at 16. They're some of my favorite people to keep in contact with. And Bobby Elston, Darren Workey, and so I think it's just a realness. I don't know how else to say it.
I 100% agree.
It makes sense.
What from Warren or from this area do you think helped you, now that you look back on it, on your career that you've had?
I think, like I said, the woods and I was a bit of a dreamer, but I found a lot of support and mentors as well to being that dreamer. I was always kind of encouraged with my creativity. I was always encouraged by teachers and other adult mentors to write. And my mom started TAG, the Trumbull Art Guild, so I was often around art and artists, and my mom was a painter. She often, so I was, we would go out to Bezetta and do tie-dyeing and do fairs. And so it was a place of both generosity and, that you're always giving to the community. My mom was an art teacher. So so much of that is Warren and my childhood and just kind of the sense of a centering compass for me in terms of, yes, you want to do your imagination and you want to be creative, but to what point? To where are you giving it to? Who are you giving it back to? And that was very much my experience in Warren.
That's so wonderful. So, did you read comics when you were little?
I did not. My brothers did. So they were around, and I remember picking them up for sure.
Uh-huh.
I think the Archies was big in our house. I don't remember exactly. I didn't. I knew of them, and like I said, I picked them up from my brothers. But I couldn't say I was a deep fangirl when I got the job. It wasn't my part of my childhood.
So, what is your specific title? What is your job right now?
Well, I'm a writer,
mm-hmm.
so as writers are, I go from job to job.
Okay, so you're not hired by any specific company?
No, I'm not. Writers are kind of freelance,
mm-hmm.
which is great
yeah.
And challenging, but it's great because I'm doing TV, I'm doing features, I'm doing big features, I did animation, so I kind of move to where the story is and what story I want to be part of to help tell, or originating my own work. And where what medium that best fits on. Yeah, sure. I'm freelance, so you go out for a job, and I went out for the job, and Marvel hooked me up with an amazing writer, Nicole Perlman, who did Guardians of the Galaxy, and is also just one of the best humans that you could ever be lucky enough to come in contact with. Mm-hmm. And they said, hey, we have an idea, why don't you guys work together? And we met, and I fell in love with her and thought it would be an honor to work with her. So we started doing Captain Marvel. I read every piece of her. I got to know her through the Marvel canon, and so we were just generating the story. So what is the story is where we started. Mm-hmm. So we were really laying down the foundation of the story, Nicole and I. So, the basic questions when you start in terms of this Captain Marvel. So, where has she been during all of these movies is a big question that you have to start with. And, she's one of the most powerful superheroes in the canon. She rivals any Avenger. So, what is that? Like, how do you handle that in terms of vulnerability and a character journey and a human journey when she's so powerful? Mm-hmm. So there's like these basic, and origin story. How do we do an origin story that's different and fun and fresh? And so you start with all those really big story questions, and we just started laying down blocks of a story that started to move through the process with the amazing executives at Marvel and Kevin Feige, and got to a story that they were excited about. And then they were moving to script. I jumped off at that point because I had a directing gig, which was a great opportunity for me. So I moved off. Nicole stayed on. And then they brought on directors who were also writers and brought amazing, they're really taking it over and writing, and they are the writers in terms of they did the screenplay. I think of myself more as a story foundation person in this process, and kind of gave them the blocks to use, and they of course brought more story blocks in and more plot twists and fun, and so we were kind of the origin of the origin story, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's so cool because you were the baseline, the foundation for that, which everything's got to start somewhere. So I think
so it's super cool. Fun and very challenging, but in the best kind of way as a writer. You always want to be challenged to do better. Push yourself, and to take on, to be part of Marvel is just a dream.
That is so cool. Just to get it correct, was Captain Marvel already like a comic? There was already kind of a story there, or was she?
She's been a character in the Marvel universe for years and years. And as with comic books, different creators create different books and bring different ideas into her story. She had a lot of different incarnations, and is continuing to in terms of the incredible comic books that are coming out now about her. So it's more using those for the kind of stuff we're going to start with, and then what story are we creating for her ourselves.
Right. So you had a baseline too of what other people had kind of done and the story that grew from her. So what was different about
that is character?
So what was different about the one you and Nicole did? Like, what kind of other things do you think you added to the story that kind of made it into what it is today?
Yeah, there's no one. You can't go find a comic book of the story that we started laying down. It's more taking inspiration from those in terms of, who are the bad guys going to be. You have to pick, and what is the story? What's happening? Coming up with this idea of an intergalactic alien war that's going to get, she's going to get tangled up with in terms of Earth. And so you're just taking kind of inspiration from all of those books, but now we're creating our own new story for her.
Right. That's so cool. What was the most fun part about writing? Or, I guess, you did kind of write.
Oh, we did, for sure. It's writing. It's just you're not going to dialogue. You're not going into actual dialogue scenes. So you're writing. It's a huge, important piece of the writing. The most fun part for me was working with her and her character, and working with Nicole Perlman, who to me is her own superwoman in her own right. So, and working with Kevin Feige, what an honor. So, but in terms of the story, just trying to work out who she was and what's her human journey, because certainly we're interested in her journey as a woman and as a female superhero, but as a writer, you're always digging into the character's humanity and what could speak to the greatest, largest audience, because we're all human.
Right.
And really working out, what did we want to say? What do we want to say as a writer? Whenever you do anything, you're thinking about what are we saying thematically, emotionally, about the human condition.
Right.
And how fun to do that with a superhero and somebody who's dealing with aliens, and yet you're still talking about the human condition. Yeah, pretty much the base core story is Nicole and I, and then the directors or writers came in and added a lot to it, in terms of new relationships that could be worked in, or plot twists, and Geneva, who is the screenwriter, is amazing, and she So think of it more like a layering,
Okay.
right? It's layering, right? So we all kind of, in terms of that story, created it together, and they went off and made the cake. I don't know.
So no, that's perfect.
Watch on screen. I get story by credit.
Story by credit. Okay. So what?
Versus like when I did Inside Out or The Good Dinosaur, I get story by credit, but I also get screenplay credit because I stayed with those and wrote actual scenes, and now I'm creating scripts and staying through that entire process. Where in this process I left.
Right. And that's what I want to ask you about next. So, nominated for Best Screenplay Oscar for Inside Out, which I love that movie.
Thank you.
Gosh, it's so good. It's one of those children's movies. Because I used to be a nanny, and it was one that it made you just think deeper. You know, it's not just a surface level animated movie. I just love that movie. So, and you won an Annie Award for that screenplay. So,
right.
Nominated for Best Screenplay Oscar. That's pretty incredible. And then won an Annie. What is an Annie Award?
That's the Animation Guild, so it's the Animation Guild's award. So like you have the SAG Award, or so it's Guild's award.
Wonderful. How did it feel to be nominated for an Oscar?
My God, amazing! I mean, we can talk about getting the dress and it's just so fun to go,
right?
But to be nominated. I just felt blessed and very lucky to be a part of Pete Docter, who was the originator and the director and the creator, to be part of his vision and help him put it out in the world. So, yeah, I can't lie. It's not bad. It's pretty good.
I mean, I love the honesty, too, because I'm thinking, like, wow, that's so cool, but at the same time, like, what am I going to wear? Like,
what are you going to wear?
Right. Wow, what are you going to wear? So, what exactly did you do? What was your role? I mean, I know screenplay in Inside Out, but if people are watching it, like, what did you contribute to that specifically?
Well, in terms of the story, some things I drew on in helping Pete tell his story was Pete had done a lot of research in terms of the mind and emotions when I came in, and but I had sent my kids to what's called an attachment preschool, which is all about that. In preschool, we wanted to learn them to help deal with their emotions and identify them. So all of that work I brought to the script. So, for example, when when he loses his wagon into the dump and Sadness sits next to him and says, "Wow, you're sad. That's sad." That literally is what I was taught at this preschool. When your kid's, block tower gets knocked down and he's upset, you don't say, "Well, let's fix it. Let's build another one." You don't need to be unhappy. You sit down and you say, "Wow, I would be sad too. Are you sad?" Like, help them identify, what is this feeling, and so that and then let them just stay with it, and then they'll process it, and then move on. So that kind of emotional intelligence I learned through that preschool, and that really I brought a lot of that to that. And then I would say when Riley comes home and talks to her parents, it felt very personal to me. That as a kid, you kind of want to be able to say to your kid, your parents, I'm doing the best I can to stay happy, because that's just me, but I'm not. And you're talking about a girl who moved a lot in high school, and you got to stay, strong for the family, and but there's also a lot more going on for that child. And I really loved how, by her speaking her truth, you want me to be happy, but I'm not. Yeah. Allowed parents open up to their emotional truth, that they also are missing where they used to live, and that actually through that sadness and truth they can bond together as a family. That was also, of course, very much Pete Docter, but whenever you're working on a film, every person involved is bringing their own deep personal things to it. Right. I went to Syracuse University for film and English, dual major.
Okay.
And then I went and, immediately decided I had nothing to write about. I'm not a good writer. You're immediately panicked.
Yeah, you're like,
now I have to do this for a living? Yeah. What? I went to New York City because I'd always wanted to live there, and I went into advertising. But then I got to a moment in my life that I was doing an interview to rise up the level, become a supervisor. And I remember in the interview on the outside, I was doing everything I needed to do to get the job, but inside I was screaming, "Don't give me this job!" And I realized, oh, I have to stop. I'm off track. Mm-hmm. And my heart really still does want to write and do movies. And I happen to have a friend from Syracuse had moved out to LA, and Chris Andrews, and he really helped give me the courage to quit and jump off a cliff and load up the U-Haul and go to LA. And was lucky enough that my husband, at the time my boyfriend, was like, me too, I'm a filmmaker, let's go. And then I became an executive. I worked with Jodie Foster for 10 years.
Wow, that's so cool.
And so I was a producer, and had the same moment come again after Jodie Foster taught me what I know about storytelling. As an actor, getting down into theme and that human condition. But then after 10 years, I again had that feeling again, which is I've learned a lot. This has been incredibly important for me, but I'm not writing. I'm just helping other people with their writing, and that's not quite it.
Yeah.
So I had to jump off the cliff again and quit, which everybody thought I was insane. Insane. I had that core group of friends who encouraged me, and Jodie encouraged me, and I started writing then. And there's always that period, no matter how much you think you know, that you have to not be good at it. So I did that.
Right.
Spent years being not good at something, because it's a craft like anything, you have to learn it. And even though my brain knew it, to talk to other writers, writing is different than talking about writing. The only way you learn to write is to actually do it. Mm-hmm. And then just slowly built up enough samples and work to then take out to the town and introduce myself to everybody as a writer. Mm-hmm. It's another jumping off a cliff, I guess. So I continually listened to that inner drive, that inner bliss or voice or whatever you want to call it, and kind of just took some chances and risks, because there always is chance and risk.
Absolutely.
Well, for International Women's Day, I would say there's no better time in terms of taking that big risk. Everybody, at least in LA, is asking for women's voices. They want to hear our stories. They want to know what we have to say. And you do have something to say. Mm-hmm. I grew up in a little town, Little Warren, Ohio, and I have a lot to say, because people in Warren, Ohio have perspectives. They have lives. They have wonderful stories. They have things to tell people, to share with people. So don't ever underestimate the value of yourself and your life experience. And then in terms of access, I'm not going to tell you it's not hard to come to a city or to go to try to get your dream. There is going to be struggle. There is going to be risk. And that is part of the journey. Look at any movie. As a writer, that is my job, to put the main character towards a dream that they have to struggle for. Why do we tell stories like that? We tell stories like that to help people understand that is part of the process. Mm-hmm. So as long as you're following what you deeply want, and I think a lot of women don't even know how to know what they want. As a culture, we're not necessarily as women trained to recognize our wants. We're often trained to service, to make sure everybody else is happy, to make sure we understand what everybody else wants. Right? But you need to start sitting with yourself and thinking, what do I want? What does it feel like to want something? And just really kind of dig down into that, and then go for it. Try little steps. It doesn't have, if you don't want to do a giant leap, don't do a giant leap. Do a small leap. But often the journey is made up of all of those small steps, right? There will come a moment you're going to probably have to take a big risk, right? But that's okay. That's part of the thrill. Sometimes I think people think, oh, I'm too scared. Well, scared and excited can feel like the same thing, right? So, just focus in on what your heart is desiring, what you want to do, and then try and get up if you fail, which can also be tricky, right?
Yes.
But that is the process. Every person I've ever met who's accomplished great things can tell you about falling and failing. But that's when you find out who you are, right? Because you can stand up, try again. I don't understand that the fall sometimes is necessary, because in the fall you learn something that you didn't know before, right? You needed to mess up and make a mistake so you could gain perspective on yourself, on the situation, on the job, on the world, on other people, on relationships, on something you've been telling yourself in your head that is not right, and the only way the universe could show you that's not right is to give you a good swift kick. Mm-hmm. That's a gift. A failure can be a great gift. I'm not saying it feels good. It doesn't.
Right. No,
but if you take that failure as some edict about your value, you're really missing the point.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Really not gaining what the insight that you can get from that.
Oh, can you just write a book or something? Like, come on, like, for real. So, do you think being a woman ever, I don't know, helped or hindered you in your career and your experience?
Oh, I was in advertising in New York City in the 1990s before sexual harassment was a word. So, yeah,
so is my mom. Yeah.
Sure. There's stuff happens. For sure, stuff happens. But you can't let that define you. Mm-hmm. You can't let that stop you. You can't let that, if you're in a job and they're hindering you because you're a woman, then I suggest looking for a different job. And not in terms of the career, but there are great mentors out there, male and female, who want you to succeed. So those are the people you need to find, right? They're there. They are there. I mean, some of my best mentors have been men. I don't think it's fair to say only women can mentor women. I've had wonderful, amazing female mentors like Jodie Foster and a woman I met when I first came to LA, Martha Luttrell, and many, many people. All my friends, male and female, who stand around you and cheer you on. But mentorship is a great thing to look.
Absolutely. Wrote Pixar's. You wrote the Good Dinosaur. You wrote that. Wow.
Yeah.
So amazing. Congrats. I just don't even, I'm like, whoo, I'm starstruck. So now you're currently writing a series for Hulu and another animated film for Netflix. So what's that been like? What's next for you? What's on your agenda?
Excited to write my own stories and things that I want to originate and things that are coming first from me. Mm-hmm. So I'm just diving in, telling stories. And it's the thing for Netflix is with Cartoon Saloon, who is an amazing animation house out of Ireland, which they're magicians, they're artists, who are just so spectacular and amazing. I get getting to work with Netflix. Again, it's, who do I want to partner with? With everything I do, I'm also trying to learn. I'm trying to push myself creatively, mm-hmm. So that's kind of my goal at the moment, tell my own stories and push myself.
And how's it feel to be working, like, with Hulu and Netflix? You said Netflix is amazing. I mean, Queer Eye for the Straight Guy is my favorite show in the entire world, so...
Well, Netflix and Hulu, I mean, that's the top, right? That's the gold standard, so... working with Hulu has been spectacular.
So as far as these female superheroes, because Captain Marvel is one, just to tie it back a tiny bit, who do you see? Do you see any other female superheroes in the future? Do you have any ideas about more, as women are kind of, what do you feel about that?
I don't know. I mean, it's not, those canons are very deep in terms of all the superhero women, but I'm not probably the expert to start identifying them.
I just wondered if you had something in your mind. You were like, this would be great. Because you want to create your own content. So I just didn't know.
I'm interested also in real life superheroes in terms of women who have been created either in great stories or books or lived in real life who. In their own time, broke through and took on the challenge and the risk. I'm interested in telling their stories too, and men too. I mean, just because I'm a woman doesn't mean I can't tell a man's story. It's more about talking about humans, right? Who in a special moment, in a special time, stand up.
What's your favorite part of the movie, the Captain Marvel movie?
Oh my God, there's so many parts. I don't even know how to. I can't tell you because it's one of the things at the end. I can't. It's a spoiler. I'm sorry. That's such a lame answer, but it's a spoiler.
Okay. Fair enough.
I love Captain Marvel and what honestly Brie Larson brings to it. There is a confidence that she begins the movie with.
Yeah.
There's a power that she's starting the movie with, and I just think that's so exciting to sit in the movie theater and see it done that way.